Another post-race live stream that we are doing here on the channel. We have a crazy amount to break down today. What an ending to the race. Now, I know that's what everybody wants to be talking about, is that ending to the race. I wasn't expecting it. None of you were expecting it. I know it was absolutely came out of nowhere. There was huge battles between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen before we got to that point, and it was absolutely insane. So, before we get into that, we do have some other things to touch on. This isn't going to be a super long post-race discussion, but regardless, we are going to get into it. Now, at the beginning of the race, I don't know if you watched my short before the race, but I did post my parlay that I would be doing for the race. Unfortunately, that did not hit due to some reasons that we could probably guess. The first being Leclerc being outside of the top 10. Unfortunately for Leclerc, who has had horrible luck since the one good thing he had in Monaco, the win this year. Unfortunately, it's been downhill from there. This weekend was no better. He finished, I think, in 11th position, if I'm not mistaken, yes. And that is due to the contact and damage that he had on the very first lap with none other than Oscar Piastri. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say Oscar Piastri is at blame to an extreme degree. It was just a racing incident, I would say. Nobody was upset about it. Obviously, you don't like to see it on the first lap. It would have been better if it didn't happen. But it did happen, and that's just the way it goes. It did end up ruining Leclerc's race. I think he had the most pit stops. I believe he had 4 pit stops, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the race. So that's definitely a lot. They just didn't have pace. I don't know exactly what the strategy was. They weren't extending the stints. They didn't try anything super special. And the only reason he finished 11th was because, as we know, Lando Norris did not finish the race. Now, besides that, we had a pretty boring race, I would say, for the majority of the Austrian Grand Prix. Some other interesting things that happened were probably some battles between Gasly and Ocon, who, as we know, don't get along too well. I love the subtle chow that Gasly gave Ocon after passing him. That was great to see, great to hear. I mean, he was only a couple tenths ahead, but it was still nice to see that little jab at him once he ended up overtaking him. At one point, it was between Ocon's previous teammate Alonso and his current teammate Gasly, who's going to be his old teammate next year. And Ocon managed to piss both of them off going into the exact same corner. So I don't know how Ocon keeps doing it. If you haven't watched my video on why I think he's maybe arguably the worst teammate in F1, go check that out and see for yourself whether you agree with that or not. But now what everybody truly wants to talk about is the incident between Max Verstappen and none other than Lando Norris. This was bound to happen. We've been building up for this for a while now. I don't know why it took so long, but it was crazy. So during the sprint race we saw yesterday, because it was a sprint weekend, during the sprint race we saw that Lando Norris is going to dive bomb. He is going to go for the overtake when he gets the opportunity. Now, he took this opportunity not too quickly during the first couple of stints because Max was just quicker. He had more pace. He was on the quicker strategy. But at one point we heard Lando's race engineer come on and say that the difference is that Lando has 2 sets of new mediums, whereas Max only has 1 set of new mediums. And this is what would end up causing a large part of the issue towards the end of the race. So what happened was on that final stint, there was a slow stop for Red Bull. Red Bull had a slow stop. I think it was 3.6 seconds or well above 3 seconds regardless. And this was right as Lando was coming in as well. So then they also had to wait for Lando to get into his pit box before they could safely release Max Verstappen, which ended up costing them maybe another second or 2. So it definitely wasn't ideal for Red Bull at that point. And not only that, but McLaren was coming out on fresh mediums, whereas Max was coming on the used mediums. Now, Max did come out ahead of Lando. I think it was close to 2 seconds, something like that. But the problem here was that now Lando was quickly gaining, and Max managed to lock up on the out lap. So this was the lap when the tires weren't in the proper window yet, and they weren't performing the way they needed to. But this definitely didn't help the tire life either. And then we got the showdown, lap after lap of pushing, of Lando trying to make a move, of Max trying to make a move back, of defending, of hard defending, on the cusp defending, some defending that some might argue isn't necessarily legal. Both drivers were on the radio non-stop going over whether what they thought was legal, what wasn't legal. They have to give positions. Lando Norris had the track violations call, and then he got the black and white flag originally, and then he got another track violations, which was investigated for. Absolutely mayhem throughout the end of the race. And it's very sad to see, because if some of these decisions might have been taken a bit quicker, we probably wouldn't have gotten this contact, which this is quite unfortunate, especially for Lando Norris, because that car had a lot of damage, and he wasn't even able to finish the race. And I don't remember the last time we saw a contact like this between two drivers when it was actually so important. I mean, when it actually mattered, like this right at the end of the race. Crazy to see. Now, about who's at fault, it's very difficult to say straight up who we think is at fault. I mean, I personally, although I don't usually have a problem with his driving, I do think Max Verstappen was quite aggressive, and he didn't leave space the way he was supposed to. Okay, I'll give it to him. Lando Norris was dive bombing, yes, but he was dive bombing within regulation. And when he saw that he'd take the place from Verstappen, he quickly gave it back when he noticed he was off track. He didn't wait around. He didn't say that he thinks he rightfully took the place. No, he knew that he had to do it on track. And when he didn't, he gave it up. But at the same time, Max was defending. After Norris would move, Verstappen would follow, just to be, you could see the little movements that were made that weren't necessarily okay. And then the contact, there was no need for it. I mean, Lando was quicker with DRS. Max could have come back and probably had a chance at overtaking again on the very next lap. So I don't think there was a need for that. It was very unfortunate because, again, both drivers got punctures. Both drivers got punctures. And I saw some comments about saying, yeah, well, 3 wheels isn't that hard to drive on because Lewis Hamilton won a race. Okay, Lewis Hamilton, he made it back to the finish line with 3 tires. He didn't complete another 3, 4, 5, 6 laps on 3 tires. So it's not really the same situation. Obviously, I think that's quite clear for everybody. You cannot race on 3 wheels. That's why both drivers went right into the pit at the end of that lap. But it was very unfortunate for both drivers, especially for Lando Norris, who really looked like he was going to get a win today. It looked like he was quick, and it looked like he had the pace. And honestly, if it would have been clean, I think he would have overtaken Max there without any issues and probably gotten away, because I still think that McLaren car is the quickest car on the grid at the moment. Now, it was unfortunate because Lando Norris had to retire his car, so he was out of the race, done, no points. And Max indeed did end up dropping to P5. He also got a 10-second penalty for the incident, which dropped him from P5 to a P5 because I think he was like 25 seconds ahead of Hulkenberg by the end of the race. So that penalty had absolutely 0 consequences whatsoever. Upsetting. And, you know, looking at the comments afterwards, a lot of people are blaming Max for this, and rightfully so, because he was very aggressive. And when you've been the dominant driver for so long, I mean, there's one time that another car might be quicker than you, just give him some space. You don't have to go for it like that. You don't have to go every single time, all or nothing. I mean, that's a lot of money at stake, a lot of people's jobs, really, people working to make sure everything is functioning properly. You cannot be doing that. He got lucky that he only dropped down to P5, because if the tables would have been turned, he could have been exactly like Lando Norris, not even having the opportunity to finish the race. So all in all, yeah, it worked out okay for Max. He still extended his lead in the championship, but I'm sure it's not the way anybody likes to see. Of course, the obvious winner from this is George Russell, who just yesterday said, starting in 3rd place, he's going to wait for the 2 drivers ahead to make some contact. Now, of course, everybody thought he was kidding, but look at this. He got lucky, and he ended up winning his 2nd Grand Prix of his career. So congratulations to George Russell. I'm sure it's not necessarily the way he would love to win it, but he'll take it. He doesn't mind. It's a part of racing, you know. Luck is a part of life. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, and he definitely won today. There was a second when we thought maybe Oscar Piastri could steal that 1st place position. It didn't end up happening, which was also okay, because he had a great race, and the 4th career podium for him, I believe. Is it the first of this year? I don't really remember. to be honest, but I know it's his 4th career podium, so it's either his 1st or 2nd of this season. 2nd place, great result for him overall. And of course, he was on the podium yesterday in 2nd position as well for the sprint race, but that doesn't really count, just like how he's had one sprint win last year as well. To round out the podium positions, we had Carlos Sainz, the other Ferrari. Great race for him as well. At least he brought some damage control, some points to Ferrari, who were looking to be in big trouble, especially with Leclerc out of the points completely. But there was some damage limitation. Overall, it was okay. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Who do you think was at fault for the incident between Max and Lando? Was it Lando for being too aggressive and going for the dive bombs? Or was Max truly moving under the braking? So let me know down in the comment section right now if you can, and we can talk about that, because I am curious to see what you think. I mean, for me, I've given my opinion. I do think it's more towards Max. But again, I think they could have both handled it a little bit better. But definitely, I think Max is more to blame than Lando. And it's very unfortunate that Lando was the only one that truly got penalized, as in he didn't even get to finish the race, didn't have a chance to get any points from this race. So it's not what we like to see. Now, of course, we do have a race next week as well, back in Silverstone. So this will be one of those races where you think about it today, you break it down, then tomorrow on to the next one. You know, you can't get hung up on it, and I'm sure they won't get hung up on it. McLaren will still be quick. Last year at Silverstone's where they brought in their new upgrades and they became much quicker and the competitive car that we know today. So it's definitely going to continue that way. I will be curious to see what happens there. This was overall not the most interesting race until the end. The ending, that final stint, loved it. That is what we love to see in Formula One. And we can see now how interesting it is when all of these cars are so close together and we actually get battles. That is what has been missing over the last couple of seasons. And I'm glad that at least we are going back towards that. Of course, not in the way I would have liked this race to end. But overall, I am happy that, you know, we got to see another race with some battles and battling for first position, which is what has been difficult, because last couple of times it's been Lando Norris chasing down Max Verstappen towards the end, but we didn't get to see much race-to-race, wheel-to-wheel action. But today we got to see some, so hopefully we continue in this direction and the driver championship battle continues just as it is. Now, I am going to wrap it up today because I do have a lot of things to do. I promise exams are almost over. We'll have more time for more videos, longer live streams, and all that. But I do want to thank you guys that did tune in. Yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more weekly F1 content, and see you guys next time. Bye.